My brother became CEO of the family business, and out of nowhere, I became the HR mistake. He humiliated me in meetings, laughed at me in front of the other executives. Before I tell you the full story of the worst day of my life, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. Help us reach as many people as possible. Thank you. They say blood is thicker than water. But they don't say what happens when the blood turns cold and runs straight into your back with a metaphorical knife shaped like a corporate promotion. I'm Nathaniel Preston. Nate, if we ever went to high school together. Or Nat, if you're my mother and still pretend I'm 12. I'm 39 years old, recently demoted to project strategist after holding the position of interim VP for 3 years at my family's company. Which sounds impressive until you realize that project strategist is just a polite way of saying, we don't want to fire you because you're family, but please don't touch anything important. Why? Because my younger brother, Mason, Golden, child, homecoming king, and my personal walking trigger for acid reflux, was named CEO last month. Let me back up a bit. My grandfather, Alton Preston, founded Preston Industries in 1964 with 2 employees, a half-finished factory, and a dream, bigger than his waistline. By the time I was old enough to understand what a supply chain was, the company had turned into a national distributor of eco-friendly packaging. Not sexy, I know, but it made us rich. Rich enough to buy a new Audi every 2 years. Rich enough that Mom had a wine cellar even though she thinks Pinot Noir is just fancy grape juice. I joined the company fresh out of Wharton, MBA and all. I wore my tie too tight and smiled through my teeth, working late nights trying to impress Dad. He never said it, but I could tell he approved, at least until Mason showed up. Mason, he's 4 years younger, looks like a Kennedy, and lies like a politician. He was always the family favorite, the kind of kid who got caught throwing a party in high school and somehow convinced our parents he was the victim. He coasted through undergrad with a degree in communications and a minor in networking at frat parties. While I was sweating bullets in conference rooms trying to solve logistics nightmares, Mason was on yachts with clients, ordering martinis and talking about brand synergy. Everyone loved him, especially the board. I should have seen it coming. The whispers, the shift in body language during meetings, the sudden way our father, Harold Preston, started saying things like fresh perspective and adaptability. And then it happened. One Monday morning, we were all summoned to the executive floor. Coffee was still hot, air conditioning was buzzing, and Dad looked like he had rehearsed his little speech in front of a mirror. "It's time to pass the baton," he said. I sat up straighter. To usher in a new era, I'm proud to announce that Mason will be stepping in as our new CEO. There was a pause, a silence so sharp it could slice bread, and then polite clapping, tight smiles, the smell of betrayal in recycled air. I looked at Dad, then at Mason, who was pretending to be surprised, hand on his chest like someone had just handed him a Nobel Prize by accident. He even did that fake modest head tilt. You know the one. Like he didn't already know. Like he didn't already have his speech saved as a PDF. He hugged Dad. I stood frozen, clapping slowly, wondering if this was actually a nightmare, and I'd wake up in my bed with a cold sweat and a little dignity. Spoiler, I didn't. What followed was worse than I could have imagined. Mason didn't waste time asserting dominance. On day 1, he moved into Dad's old office and redecorated it like a tech startup, all glass desks and millennial beanbags. He wore sneakers to board meetings, called me bro in front of interns, made suggestions about my department during town halls, the kind of suggestions that slowly chipped away at my authority until I was just a hollow figurehead nodding politely while he rewrote the script. Then came the meetings he forgot to invite me to, the new titles, the restructuring that put me 2 rungs below a kid who once asked if Wi-Fi could run out like batteries. The cherry on top? He made me report to him, my own younger brother, the kid I used to bribe with fruit roll-ups just to leave, me alone in middle school. Our mother said, "Give him a chance," as if this was some blind date and not a Shakespearean betrayal staged with boardroom lighting. I'd go home to my 1-bedroom apartment. Yes, I never married, thank you for asking. and drink exactly 3 fingers of scotch while staring at the wall. My therapist says I'm suppressing my emotions. I say she charges too much for that opinion. But let me be honest. I didn't just feel humiliated. I felt erased. I gave 20 years to that company. 20 years. I sacrificed birthdays, relationships, sleep, and apparently my entire hairline for that business. I was supposed to take the helm. I earned it. But no. Apparently being marketable and good with people counts more than actual work. And Mason? He took everything I built and branded it with his dumb slogan, Preston, packing the future. I should have quit. I should have walked out, flipped a chair, and slammed the door like a dramatic ex-lover in a Hallmark movie. But I didn't. Because I'm not done yet. There's something dangerous about a man who's humiliated and patient. I've been both for a very long time. I started paying attention. Not to what Mason said, but what he didn't say. Who he trusted too much. What he rushed. Where he got lazy. And trust me, Mason gets lazy. He's used to things falling into place for him. People like that never see the cracks until it's too late. I found the cracks, and now I just need to widen them. So, no, I'm not quitting. Not yet. I'll sit. Here in my beige office with my demotion plaque and my artificial respect from new hires who think I'm some corporate antique. But inside, I'm sharpening knives, and Mason's name is engraved on the blade. Here's the thing about being underestimated. It's the closest thing to invisibility that a man in khakis and a receding hairline can achieve. After Mason's coronation as CEO, I slipped into the background so gracefully you'd think I was born for it. I stopped correcting him in meetings. I let him botch quarterly reports with confidence. I smiled at interns when they called me Mr. Preston's older brother, like I was some malfunctioning relic of nepotism past, and I waited. See, I knew my brother, knew how he thought, how he worked, or rather how he didn't. Mason had always been one of those big picture guys, meaning he couldn't manage his own inbox without an assistant who doubled as a babysitter. He lived for vision boards and buzzwords and made business decisions the way most people order off a cocktail menu, by picking whatever sounded trendiest. So I started keeping notes. Literally. I created a Google Doc titled The Fall of Rome just to amuse myself. In it, I listed every questionable hire, shady vendor deal, overinflated marketing campaign, and lavish expense he greenlit without so much as blinking. Private jet to a one-day summit in Aspen? Logged. Hiring his college roommate as head of client experience with 0 experience and a cocaine problem? Logged. Changing our longtime supplier to some flashy startup out of Miami that delivered half the inventory and twice the drama? Logged. And then there was the crypto debacle. God help me. The crypto debacle. Mason, in his infinite genius, decided that Preston Industries needed to embrace the blockchain, which, in his vocabulary, meant funneling $2.3 million of company funds into a doomed altcoin pitched by a guy in a pink blazer named Chase. No last name. Just Chase. When I questioned the decision, Mason said, and I quote, "You're thinking like a boomer, bro. We need disruptive agility." That was the moment I realized. My revenge didn't need to be a frontal assault. It just needed a good nudge. And gravity would do the rest. I started collecting emails, forwarding things to my personal account, downloading contracts, invoice receipts, Slack screenshots, anything that painted a picture of my dear baby brother as the reckless man-child he truly was. I didn't need to fabricate a scandal. Mason was a scandal in a suit. All I had to do was build the exhibit. But the crown jewel came wrapped in irony. You see, while Mason was busy networking, getting hammered at industry mixers and name-dropping our father, he had apparently started an affair with one of our board members' wives. Yes, because of course he did. It wasn't even subtle. The woman, Marcy Caldwell, age 45 and Botoxed into oblivion, would show up at our offices every Thursday under the guise of consulting on the executive rebrand. Mason would block off 3 hours on his calendar, label it as core synergy discussion, and lock the door. I had a hunch, but confirmation came through Kevin, the guy who managed our IT systems and had the moral backbone of a wet napkin. One day, after Mason chewed him out in front of a room full of execs for a minor Wi-Fi issue, Kevin knocked on my door looking sheepish and vengeful. Hypothetically, he said, if someone were accessing their company laptop to email, let's say explicit content during work hours, and hypothetically that laptop was being backed up to the company server, should we do something about that? I didn't even blink. Yes, Kevin, we absolutely should. That's how I got a digital treasure chest of Mason's private messages, screenshots of hotel bookings, photos that could make a bishop cry, voice memos where he called our father a clueless dinosaur, and a charming video where he very clearly brags to Marcy about cooking the numbers a little to make the last quarter look more impressive to investors. Gold. Now, some people might say I went too far, but those people never sat through a Monday morning meeting where their baby brother referred to them as my guy Nate, while sipping a green juice and doodling on a whiteboard like an over-medicated kindergartner. So no, I didn't feel guilty. Felt methodical. There was just one problem. Timing. If I pulled the trigger too early, it'd blow back on me. Mason might be an idiot, but he was a charming idiot. The kind people root for, until it's absolutely, indisputably clear that he's a danger to himself and others. So I waited for the annual stakeholders summit. It was a prestigious, over-the-top gathering held in a luxury hotel ballroom, full of people in tailored suits pretending to care about sustainable packaging, while mentally calculating how many zeros were in their bonus checks. My father would be there. The board. Investors, journalists, and most importantly, Marcy, wife of Charles Caldwell, head of our compliance committee. The room would be full. The optics, impeccable. A week before the summit, I anonymously emailed a file titled transparency.zip to Charles Caldwell, 2 senior board members, and just for spice, our largest external investor, Judith Langley. Judith is 71 years old, doesn't tolerate fools, and once called a former CFO a sentient meatball. Perfect audience. The file contained screenshots of Mason's personal emails, video clips, audio recordings, a timeline of questionable financial decisions, and a neat little folder titled Synergy Thursdays that contained footage from our office security cameras. I didn't sign the email, didn't need to. Let the evidence speak. And then I waited, like a snake in a business casual sweater vest. The morning of the summit, Mason walked in wearing a navy blue suit 2 sizes too tight, grinning like the prom king of Wall Street. He kissed Marcy on the cheek in full view of 3 interns, and gave a speech about transformational growth that sounded like it had been written by ChatGPT on mushrooms. I stood near the back, smiling, sipping lukewarm coffee and pretending to take notes. By the time he finished, Charles Caldwell was already walking out. Judith followed. 2 board members stood, whispering. Mason noticed. His jaw twitched. He tried to laugh it off. He even winked at me. I winked back. And then the head of HR walked up and asked Mason to step outside for a quick clarification. That was the last time Mason Preston was seen in a professional setting with both shoes on. There's something poetic about watching your childhood bully self-destruct in a suit that cost more than your car. Poetic, or maybe just darkly satisfying. I never was the artistic type, more of a spreadsheet man. But that morning was art. Mason didn't come back into the ballroom. Oh, he tried. After 20 minutes in a side room with HR, legal, and a few board members whose veins bulged with suppressed rage, he made a dramatic entrance like some disgraced televangelist, sweat beading on his forehead, eyes darting across the room for sympathy he hadn't earned. He mumbled something about misunderstandings and internal reviews, and then my personal favorite. He blamed it on being too visionary. Yes, Mason. You were so visionary that you invested company money into a coin called Beaver Coin that collapsed after its founder was arrested for tax fraud in Lithuania. Visionary indeed. R escorted him out like a toddler who bit someone at recess. No announcement, no dramatic speech. Just the silence of reputations imploding and one guy quietly clapping near the back. That was me. But my revenge didn't end there. Oh no. I had waited too long, swallowed too much pride, and sat through too many Mason-led power huddles where we brainstormed ideas like reinventing synergy and disrupting our own brand. No, I wanted everything. And lucky for me, once the dust settled, the company was in damage control mode, scrambling for leadership. They needed a clean name, a steady hand, someone boring enough to make investors relax. Guess who's boring as Helen owns 3 identical navy blazers? Yep, they called it interim, of course, just a placeholder, a gentle way to avoid admitting that the guy you overlooked for a decade is now the only adult left in the room. Still, I wasn't stupid. I knew that the board didn't actually respect me. They just feared headlines. A clean transition. No lawsuits, no drama. Just Nate Preston, the human sedative, sliding into the CEO chair like an antacid after a long corporate hangover. Fine by me. I took the office. The corner one that used to be my father's, ripped out the standing desk Mason had installed, tossed the inspirational posters, put up a framed photo of a bonsai tree and a quote that said, "Success is the best deodorant." The first thing I did as acting CEO, fired Kevin. Yeah, I know. Harsh. But Kevin talked too much. And this entire thing worked because no one suspected me. Letting him hang around was like leaving a live grenade in your glove compartment. I gave him a generous severance, though. I'm not a monster. The second thing I did? I sold the espresso machine Mason insisted we buy for the executive floor. You know, the $12,000 one that required a barista certification to operate. Replaced it with a $49 Mr. Coffee from Target. Symbolism. Mason, meanwhile, tried to recover his reputation like a drunk looking for his dignity after karaoke night. He posted a long, rambling LinkedIn essay about lessons learned through adversity, blamed the toxic pressures of legacy leadership, and tried to launch a podcast called Bro CEO, where he interviewed other washed-up executives with too many syllables in their job titles. It lasted 3 episodes. 1 was about failing upward. 2 on the nose, even for him. My father finally called me about a week after the summit. Not to apologize, of course. Just to say, in his usual gruff way, "Heard you handled it." That was the closest thing I'd ever get to a well done. And, honestly, it was enough. I never wanted praise. Never needed a parade. Just wanted what I'd earned. A little dignity. A little power. And the chance to not be humiliated in my own family company by a guy who once ate glue and cried when he lost at Monopoly. But here's the twist. The part they never put in revenge movies. It didn't feel as good as I thought it would. Sure, there was satisfaction. That quiet hum of justice done. But there was also something else. Something hollow. Maybe because I realized that I spent half my adult life chasing approval from a family that only noticed me when I disappeared. Maybe because revenge, when finally served, is lukewarm and oddly chewy. Or maybe because when the villain dies and you're the last man standing, all that's left is paperwork, a lot of it. Meetings, investor calls, legal reviews, HR disputes. Oh, and those invoices from the marketing department that still think a TikTok strategy is more important than supply chain logistics. I should have felt victorious, but instead, I felt tired. I started walking to work, left my car in the garage, got coffee at the corner bodega where no one knew my name, and no one cared who my brother was. The barista once asked me if I was an insurance adjuster. It was the nicest thing anyone had ever called me. One morning, about a month after Mason's fall, I saw him. On the street, wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, carrying a smoothie, walking a dog that wasn't his. He looked normal. Sad, but normal. Like a guy trying to piece himself together with therapy quotes and overpriced supplements. We made eye contact. He gave me a half-hearted nod, and I nodded back. Because honestly, I didn't hate him anymore. The hate had burned itself out. Like cheap fireworks, Loud, dramatic, and ultimately disappointing. He kept walking. So did I. And that, I guess, was the real ending. No fistfight. No tearful confession. Just two brothers, one stripped of a title, the other burdened with it, passing each other on the street like strangers with matching DNA. Now I sit at the top floor of Preston Industries, typing emails, fixing Mason's mess, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug. My name is on the door now, but it doesn't mean much, because names fade, titles shift, legacies crumble. What doesn't fade? Receipts and a good zip file.